Because I suppose the downside of specialization and paradigm-driven work is that it can be routine and just not really able to see beyond the solutions of problems that have already been created.
But having agreed with you on that, I'd quickly add it's the way most knowledge systems are developed. It's the way most science makes its progress. It's within sort of loosely structured, at least loosely structured paradigm systems. It's cumulative. It can be self-interrogating to some extent within its own assumptions. The boundaries of paradigms, I think, at least I would say, you may not agree, I think are, at least in the social sciences, pretty loose, permeable or semi-permeable. So it's not like we're locked in, even if we're doing paradigm-based work. But by and large, it is an enterprise that often fails to ask the fundamental questions of, well, are our fundamental assumptions, I mean, how tenable are they? We often, some of us outside of economics, of course, would fault economics for its overly simplified, few powerfully rigorous assumptions about human thinking and acting. Interestingly, I think one of the most exciting fields now in the social sciences is in economics, where these long-reigning paradigms, I think, are being, if not questioned, then added to out of fields like experimental economics and the like. I think paradigm-driven science shouldn't be dismissed by any means.
Great.
I don't think you were, but I certainly wouldn't.
Let's talk about the third leg of CARS, and that's the idea of contributing to solutions.
Right.
So it's the interface between knowledge and the solution of problems. And in the social sciences, the problems are the biggest, the messiest, the most complex that we find. I suppose weather science is equally complex, but the problem of addressing poverty and racism it's not a problem that can be addressed with just one causal theory.
Right.
So the challenge that you're setting to yourself is a very, very difficult one. And I guess I'd love to hear your thinking about how focused social science research, interdisciplinary research, really can contribute to the discovery of and the design of some solutions.
I think, first of all, the word solutions sounds like there's an idea that ultimately you find a solution to the problem of racism. Racism is a dilemma. Most social problems are really dilemmas. They're not puzzles with real solutions. Dilemmas have no ultimate solutions. They have resolutions. They tend to be conditional, somewhat situational. Having said that, I think the purpose of using the word solutions in the title is to suggest that we're really going to hold our theoretical feet to the fire. We're really going to take the more abstract formulations that, in a sense, are drawn out of the empirical world back and say, well, if this is true, then if we can intervene in the following way, using that sort of causal or theoretical formulation as a guide, then we would expect the following things to happen. This is more of an experimental interventionist mode. And, and that's the premise, the more epistemological premise, if you will, or operational premise, really, of CARS, that we will take on the responsibility of getting into the world and seeing if we can find enough systematic knowledge, or using as much systematic knowledge as we're able to accumulate, to also create some strategies of addressing problems, mitigating the problems, if not ultimately eliminating them, solving them, in new ways. That is, making the strategy of address and solution more effective. And again, the premise that I use in building our projects is that we get better and better at that to the extent that our science and theory is more sharply honed. It's more sharply honed if we constantly take it back and say, well, let's try to put it to work. And when it doesn't work, what do we need to change about it? So take it back and try it again. Mm-hmm. And it'll also be better in that same process if we're in league with the practitioners who are helping us understand why the theory by itself, we need to have a theory of implementation as well as a causal theory, if you will.
A specific example, and I know that one of the projects that CARS is currently engaging in is the future of transportation. But I lived in Boston for a number of years, and the traffic congestion to Logan Airport was always considered to be a major social problem. Mm-hmm. And a kind of intuitive response to the problem, solution to the problem, was to build a third harbor tunnel. Mm-hmm. And even before the tunnel was finished, there were behavioral scientists, social scientists, who were saying, that may look like a solution, but it's not. And we predict that the total volume of traffic will actually be greater after the completion of the tunnel than it is now. That, in other words, the apparent solution is actually a way of worsening the problem.
Right. Right. You'd think by now that that particular solution would be so discredited by empirical examples of that kind that it wouldn't any longer require simulations of what might have it. It is truly a case, if you build it, they do come. So that indeed is not a solution, and in part it demonstrates one of the first steps that we take in all our projects, and that is not only what do we know about this phenomenon, as best as the studies have been done to generate that knowledge base, but what has been tried, and what has tried in an interventionist mode, in a change mode, and what has worked and what hasn't worked, and what's known about through systematic evaluations, creditable evaluations of why it hasn't worked. And then where do we go next, both theoretically and empirically, but also with solution strategies? That's kind of the way to do it. Yes, I would say that the real third leg of CARS is really this implementation. Once you begin to find what you think on a somewhat smaller local scale is a way to close the achievement gap, let's say, during the first 3 or 4 years of formal schooling, how can you take it to scale? How can you do it at a system-wide level rather than in one school? How can you do it not only in Ann Arbor, but do it in Detroit and do it in New York City? Those are the big challenges, because it's not just the scale issue for any kind of a solution, whether it's in space or whether it's in social space. It's really also one of locale, and again, it's this trade-off that this dialectic or dynamic that you referred to earlier as the global-local one. How much of some kind of solution, any kind of solution, that you achieve on a somewhat more localized or smaller scale is viable, is possible at a bigger scale or on a different locale. Mm-hmm. And unless you know that, you really don't either have a very effective solution strategy, nor do you necessarily have a particularly good theory.